My morning coffee was always the same. I measured the grounds by the scoop, not the tablespoon. The water had to be just off the boil. I took the first sip at the kitchen table, looking at the birch tree in the yard. It was a Tuesday. The doorbell rang at 10:15. I was not expecting anyone. It was my daughter, Liana. She held a cardboard tray with 2 paper cups. She smiled, a wide, warm smile I had known since her first day of school. "I was in the neighborhood," she said. "I brought you a latte." She stepped inside, her perfume a soft cloud in the hallway. I thanked her and took the cup. It was sweet, too sweet for me. I drank it anyway. She talked about her work, her husband's promotion. She asked about my arthritis. She was solicitous, careful. Then she glanced at the papers on my desk. They were household bills, mostly. "That looks overwhelming, Dad," she said. Her voice was pure sympathy. "Let me help you sort that mess out." I told her it was fine. I had a system. She gently insisted. "It's no trouble," she said. "I can set up auto pay for everything." I hesitated. She placed her hand over mine. "Just let me help you," she said. "It's what family does." That was the beginning. It felt like care. It felt like love. It was the first thread of a net, being woven around me. Liana's help became routine. She came by every Thursday. First, it was the bills. She linked my accounts to an email address she created. She said it was for security. Then it was the doctor's appointments. She said their online system was confusing. She offered to be my contact person. She said it would ensure nothing was missed. I gave her the permission forms. She filled them out for me. Her handwriting was neat and efficient. One Thursday, she brought her husband, Mark. Mark was a financial advisor. He was friendly, with a firm handshake. "Liana mentioned you've got some old investments," he said. "Just sitting there, not really optimized." I had a pension, some bonds. They were safe. They provided enough. Mark called them sleeping assets. He said they could be working harder for me. He offered to look at everything. He said it was just a review. A family favor. I felt a flicker of resistance. It was a small, cold feeling in my chest. I dismissed it. This was my daughter. This was her husband. They were successful. They wanted to help. To question them felt ungrateful. It felt like being difficult. So I gave Mark the statements. He took them with a grateful nod. "We'll get this all squared away," he said. "You won't have to worry about a thing." The help expanded. Liana hired a cleaning service. She said the dust was aggravating my breathing. She hired a lawn care company. She said the mowing was a fall risk. She used a credit card she had gotten for me. She said it was easier for tracking expenses. The statements went to her email. She summarized them for me. "Just a few household things," she'd say. The numbers seemed higher than I remembered. But memory, she reminded me, can be tricky. Then came the phone call about the family cabin. My brother Martin called. His voice was strained. "Did you get the paperwork from the lawyer?" he asked. I had not. "About buying out your share of the lake place," he said. I was silent. "Liana said you agreed," Martin continued. "She said you wanted to simplify. My share of the cabin was from our parents. It was not worth a fortune. But it was the place we spent every summer. It was where Liana learned to swim. Martin loved it. I loved it." I told Martin I knew nothing about it. He was quiet for a long moment. "She sent me an email," he said. "From your account. It said you were feeling overwhelmed by joint ownership." It said you wanted a clean sale. I called Liana. My hand was steady on the phone. She answered brightly. I asked her about the cabin. Her tone shifted. It became patient, explaining. Dad, that place is a liability, she said. The roof is old. The property taxes keep going up. You never go there anymore. I was just handling the headache for you. I told her I had not agreed to sell. She sighed softly. It was the sigh of someone dealing with a stubborn child. We talked about it last month, she said. Don't you remember? You said it was too much trouble. I searched my memory. I found no such conversation. You must have forgotten, she said. Her voice was gentle. It's okay. It happens. That's why I'm here. That was the first betrayal. It was not loud. It was not violent. It was a quiet erasure of my will. It was dressed in the language of concern. I felt a deep, unsettling chill. The net around me was no longer invisible. I could feel its weight. Things accelerated after the cabin. Liana suggested I might be more comfortable in a managed living facility. Just a tour, she said. They have great activities. I refused. She looked hurt. I'm only thinking of your safety, she said. Mark mentioned a family meeting with an estate lawyer. He said it was standard planning. I said I would think about it. Their visits became more frequent. Their questions became more pointed. Did you take your medication today, Dad? You left the stove on last time I was here. The bank called me. They said you seemed confused about your PIN. I had not spoken to the bank. I checked my burner. It was off. I took my pills every morning in a dated box. But the seeds of doubt were planted. In their eyes. And slowly in my own. Then my oldest friend Arthur stopped calling. I phoned him. He sounded awkward, distant. Liana said you're resting, he said. She said you're not up for long chats. I told him that wasn't true. He hesitated. She said the doctors are running tests. For your memory. I had not seen a doctor for my memory. The chill in my chest became a solid block of ice. I realized I was being managed. I was being narrated. My own story was being rewritten by someone else. And the first draft made me the villain. A confused, stubborn, forgetful old man. A man who needed to be protected from himself. That was my silent awakening. It did not come with a shout. It came in the dead quiet of my own kitchen. After Liana had left. After another too-sweet latte was washed down the drain. I looked at the birch tree. I made a decision. I would not argue. I would not confront. I would observe. I would document. I would become the historian of my own dismantling. I went to a discount store across town. I bought a simple notebook. It had a black cover. I bought a cheap, pay-as-you-go mobile phone. I activated it with cash. I bought a small lockbox. I hid these things in the back of my filing cabinet, behind decades of old tax returns. I began my records. I wrote down every visit. The date, the time, the reason given. I noted every mention of my health or memory. I transcribed Liana's sighs. I recorded Mark's financial suggestions. I wrote down the things I was told I had said. I wrote down the things I had actually said. The two lists grew. They did not match. I started checking my official email. Liana had changed the password. I used the forgot password link. It sent a reset to her email. I could not access it. I called my bank. I asked for paper statements to be mailed. The representative was polite. She said my profile indicated a preference for electronic statements. She said the authorized user on the account had confirmed it just last week. I asked who the authorized user was. She gave me Liana's name. I had not authorized it, but I had signed so many papers. I did not react. I wrote it down. Date, time, representative's name. Fact, unauthorized user on primary checking. I made an appointment with my doctor. Alone. I did not tell Liana. At the appointment, I asked for a cognitive assessment. Dr. Evans was surprised. "You seem sharp as a tack, Henry," he said. I insisted. He administered a standard test. I scored in the high normal range. He printed the results. He signed and dated them. I thanked him. I placed the document in my lockbox. It was a baseline, a fact against the fiction. I requested a copy of the durable power of attorney document, the one I had signed for Liana. It took 3 weeks to arrive. When it came, I studied it. The notary's signature was familiar. It was a woman from my church. I remembered signing it at Liana's kitchen table. The document was standard, but attached to it was an addendum. It was a single paragraph. It stated that if 2 physicians deemed me unable to manage my affairs, the power of attorney would become immediately effective and irrevocable. I did not remember that addendum. The notary's stamp was on it. I looked at the signature line. My signature looked like mine, but the flourish at the end was slightly off. It was a tremor I did not have. I took the document to a forensic document examiner. I found one through a lawyer's referral service. I paid in cash. His office was quiet and smelled of paper. He placed the document under a stereo microscope. He took photographs with different light sources. A week later, he gave me his report. His conclusion was careful. The signature showed signs of being slowly drawn, possibly traced. The pen pressure was inconsistent with my other known signatures. The notary's journal showed I had signed only the main document. The addendum was not logged. The examiner could not state definitively it was a forgery, but he outlined the anomalies. His report was 5 pages of calm, technical language. It was a shield made of facts. I rented a postal box in the next town. I redirected all my important mail there. My Social Security, my pension, my property tax bills. I did it online, late at night. I used my new, secret phone for the 2-factor authentication. I opened a new bank account. At a different bank. I funded it with a small transfer from my old account. I did not want to trigger any alerts. I began depositing my redirected checks there. It was not much, but it was mine. It was invisible. Liana and Mark's pressure intensified. They presented me with a document from a law firm. It was a petition for conservatorship, a guardianship. They said it was a protective measure. Just in case, Mark said. It would let us help you more effectively. It's for your own good, Dad, Liana said. Her eyes were glistening. I lie awake at night worrying about you. I took the document. I told them I needed to read it. I told them I would have my lawyer look at it. The air in the room changed. Your lawyer, Liana asked. Her voice was thin. Since when do you have a lawyer? I just think it's prudent, I said. My voice was calm. It was the calm I used when fixing a delicate clock. Mark's smile tightened. Of course, he said. Due diligence. They left shortly after. Their cheer was brittle. I knew I was out of time. The procedural net was closing. They had the momentum of seeming care. They had the documents most of them real. They had the narrative of a declining father. I had a notebook. I had a lockbox. I had a quiet, gathering storm of facts. The next morning, I went to see a lawyer. Not the one they had suggested. I found Evelyn Vance through a different referral. Her practice focused on elder law. Her office was quiet, with wood paneling. She did not offer me pity. She offered me her attention. I laid out the story. I did not speak with emotion. I presented it in order. The help, the cabin, the email, the added names on accounts, the power of attorney addendum. I showed her my notebook. I showed her the doctor's assessment. I showed her the document examiner's report. I showed her the conservatorship petition. Evelyn listened. She took notes on a legal pad. She asked precise questions. Did you ever revoke the power of attorney? No. Do you have proof the notary's journal entry is different? I had the examiner's report. Have you expressed your wishes to remain independent to anyone else? I had to Arthur, my friend, before he was told to stop calling. Evelyn put down her pen. She looked at me for a long moment. This is a pattern, she said. It's called predatory or exploitative guardianship grooming. It is unfortunately common. The strategy is to create a paper trail of incapacity, then to use the legal system to make it permanent. Her words were clinical. They gave a name to the chill in my bones. What do you want to do? She asked. I told her. I wanted the power of attorney revoked. Formally and completely. I wanted my name removed from all joint accounts with Liana and Mark. I wanted a cease and desist letter regarding the conservatorship. I wanted to explore my options regarding the cabin sale. I wanted my financial and medical privacy restored. Mostly, I wanted it to stop. Evelyn nodded. We can do all that, she said. But they have filed a petition. That initiates a court process. We must respond. We must build a defense of your competence. It will be slow. It will be intrusive. A court investigator will visit your home. They will interview your friends, your doctor. They will scrutinize your life. Are you prepared for that? I looked out her window. The sky was a flat gray sheet. I thought of my birch tree. I thought of my quiet kitchen. I thought of the net, now visible, trying to draw tight. Yes, I said. My voice was quiet. It did not waver. Evelyn's first move was swift. She filed an emergency motion to suspend the existing power of attorney. She attached the doctor's assessment. She attached my affidavit, stating I felt unduly pressured. She attached the document examiner's report on the addendum. A judge granted a temporary suspension pending a hearing. Liana was no longer my legal agent. She found out when she tried to pay a bill with my account. The card was declined. Her reaction was not calm. She came to my house. She did not bring a latte. Her face was pale with anger. What have you done? She demanded. Do you know how embarrassing that was? I stood in my doorway. I did not invite her in. I have taken legal steps, I said. All communication should go through my attorney. I recited Evelyn's address and phone number. Liana stared at me. Her expression shifted from anger to something else. It was calculation. You're not well, Dad, she said. Her voice dropped to a wounded tone. This paranoia. Hearing some lawyer to turn you against your family. This proves you need help. The court will see that. She turned and left. I closed the door. I locked it. I leaned against the cool wood. My heart was a hard, fast drum in my chest. I wrote it all down in the notebook. The court process began. It was nothing like television. It was paperwork. It was waiting. It was quiet, draining formality. A court investigator named Ms. Cortez visited my home. She was a woman in her 50s with a calm demeanor. She looked at everything: my clean kitchen, my organized filing cabinet, my medication box. She asked me questions. What year was it? Who was the president? Could I explain my monthly budget? I showed her my new bank statements. I showed her my calendar. I told her about my daily walks. She asked why I thought my daughter had filed for conservatorship. I chose my words carefully. I said I believed she and her husband had a different vision for my life. I said they had taken financial steps without my full understanding. I said I felt my autonomy was being prematurely taken from me. I did not call her a thief. I did not accuse her of forgery. Not yet. Ms. Cortez took notes. She gave nothing away. She interviewed Arthur. She interviewed Dr. Evans. She interviewed the pastor of my church. I later learned what they said. Arthur told her I was the same thoughtful man I'd always been. He mentioned Liana had asked him to stop visiting. Dr. Evans confirmed my cognitive health. My pastor said I seemed engaged and peaceful. He also mentioned Liana had asked about donating some of my furniture. For when he moves, she had said. I was not moving. The hearing date was set. It was 2 months away. Evelyn prepared me. She said the judge would want clear evidence of my capacity or of their undue influence. We had the first. We needed more of the second. Then the secondary attack arrived. It came by certified mail. It was a lawsuit filed by Liana and Mark. It was not about guardianship. It was a civil claim. They alleged I had promised them the down payment for their house. They claimed it was a verbal contract. They said they had relied on this promise. They had foregone other opportunities. They were suing me for $150,000, the amount of my remaining bond portfolio. Evelyn read the filing. She tapped a line. This is a pressure tactic, she said. They are trying to drain your resources for the guardianship fight. They are also trying to create a conflict, to make you look litigious and unstable. It's a common flanking maneuver. I felt a surge of cold nausea. The net was not just above me. It was below me, too. Can they win? I asked. Based on a verbal promise, Evelyn shook her head. Extremely unlikely. But they don't need to win. They need to exhaust you. They need to run up your legal bills. They need to make you settle. I went home that night. I felt very tired. The birch tree was losing its leaves. The branches were skeletal against the twilight. I made my coffee. I sat at the table. I opened my notebook. I read through the entries. The story was all there. The story of a good father. The story of a caring daughter. The slow, imperceptible shift from one story to the other. I closed the book. I knew what I had to do. I had to fight on 2 fronts. And I had to win on both. Evelyn filed a motion to dismiss the civil lawsuit. She argued it was frivolous. She attached my financial records, showing regular, modest gifts to Liana over the years. No single sum approached their claim. She noted the timing, right after the guardianship petition. The judge consolidated the 2 matters. The civil suit would be heard after the competency issue. It was a small victory. It bought time. We began discovery for the guardianship hearing. We requested all their financial records related to me. We subpoenaed the records from the cleaning service, the lawn company. We requested copies of all emails from Liana's account that mentioned me, my health, or my finances. The response was a wall of paper. A leaner and a paralegal spent days going through it. They found it. It was in an email chain between Liana and Mark. It was from 7 months earlier. It was forwarded to a leaner as part of the discovery package. Their lawyer likely missed it. It was buried in a string about home renovations. Mark had written, "The cabin sale is moving. Once that's done, we'll have the liquidity for the addition. Once we get the conservatorship, his pension and the bonds will cover the monthly. The house is the final piece. We can sell it and move him into Maple Grove. The buy-in fee will take most of the proceeds, but it gets us clear title. Timing is everything. He's getting suspicious about the bills." Liana had replied, "Just be patient. He's forgetful. I'm reinforcing that. Dr. Evans's nurse is a friend of Sarah's. I'm working on getting a note about memory concerns in his file. The key is making it look medical, not financial. People understand that." I read the printout in a leaner's office. The words did not blur. They were stark and clear. They were the blueprint, the plan to monetize my life, to turn my independence into their addition, my home into their clear title, my mind into a medical file. I felt nothing at first, then a profound, hollow sadness. It was the death of a story, the story of my daughter. "This is it," a leaner said. Her voice was flat. "This is evidence of undue influence, of a plan to exploit. This is what the court needs to see. We would enter it as evidence. We would also file a criminal complaint for the forgery of the power of attorney addendum." A leaner advised against it. She said the civil and probate courts were our priority. The criminal case would be slower, less certain. I agreed. The document was for the judge, to show pattern, to show intent. The week before the hearing, Liana called me. On my secret phone. I do not know how she got the number. Her voice was different. It was stripped of all pretense. It was cold and tired. "You're going to ruin everything," she said. "After all we've done for you. You're going to air our private family business in court. For what? So you can die alone in that crumbling house." I did not speak. "We could have made this easy," she continued. "You could have been comfortable, taken care of. Now you've forced our hand. You think your lawyer's little notes will matter. I'm your daughter. Who do you think they'll believe?" I remained silent. The silence stretched. It became its own answer. She hung up. I added the call to my notebook. The final entry before the hearing. The probate court was a plain room. The furniture was worn. The air smelled of dust and anxiety. Liana and Mark sat with their lawyer. They did not look at me. I sat with a leaner. The judge was a woman with silver hair and sharp eyes. She had our filings. She had the investigator's report. The hearing began. It was not dramatic. It was a methodical dismantling. Their lawyer spoke first. He painted a picture of a loving daughter, a picture of a father showing signs of decline, forgetfulness, stubbornness, financial confusion. He mentioned the stove. He mentioned the bank pin. He presented the signed power of attorney. He said it showed my trust. He said the conservatorship was a natural, protective next step. He asked Liana to testify. She took the stand. She was sworn in. She spoke softly. She talked about her worries. She described my confusion over the cabin. She cried when she described finding the stove on. They were perfect tears. They traced gentle lines down her cheeks. She said she only wanted what was best for me. She said the lawsuit was a last resort, a promise I had broken. She looked small. She looked wounded. She looked like a good daughter. Then it was Eleanor's turn. Her voice was calm and clear. She approached the witness stand. "Ms. Reed," she began, "you say your father was confused about selling the cabin." "Yes," Leona said. "Did you send an email to your uncle, Martin Reed, from your father's account?" I may have. He asked me to." "Did your father ask you to send that email?" He may have forgotten." "The email stated he wanted a clean sale. Is that correct?" "Yes." Eleanor walked back to our table. She picked up a document. "Your Honor, I would like to enter into evidence Plaintiff's Exhibit 12. An email chain from the defendant's own production." The judge nodded. Eleanor handed a copy to Liana. "Can you read the highlighted portion, Ms. Reed?" Liana looked down. Her face lost its color. She was silent. "Shall I read it for the court?" Eleanor asked. The judge said, "Please." Eleanor read Mark's email aloud. Her voice was neutral. It gave the words their own terrible weight. "The cabin sale is moving. Once that's done, we'll have the liquidity for the addition." She read Liana's reply. "Just be patient. He's forgetful. I'm reinforcing that." The room was utterly still. The only sound was the hum of the fluorescent lights. "Ms. Reed," Eleanor continued, "does this email suggest your primary concern was your father's welfare, or the liquidity for your home addition?" Liana's lawyer stood up. "Objection, argumentative." "Sustained," the judge said. But the words were in the air. They had taken root. Eleanor moved on. She entered the document examiner's report. She entered the notary's journal entry. She entered my doctor's cognitive assessment. She entered my own affidavit. She entered my notebook as a demonstration of my organized mind. She called Dr. Evans. He testified to my capacity. She called Arthur. He testified to my consistency and to Liana's request to isolate me. She called Ms. Cortez, the investigator. Ms. Cortez summarized her findings. She said my home was well-ordered. She said my accounts were managed. She said the people in my life described a competent man. She said the evidence suggested a pattern of influence. Liana and Mark's lawyer tried to salvage it. He argued the emails were private, taken out of context. He argued the addendum was a standard clause. He argued my record-keeping was a sign of obsession, not competence. But the foundation was cracked. The judge's face was unreadable. She listened. She took notes. Finally, she spoke. "This is a difficult case," she began. "It is always painful when family disagrees about care. The court's sole duty is to determine the need for a conservatorship. The petitioner must prove by clear and convincing evidence that Mr. Reed is unable to manage his affairs. I have seen evidence of disagreements. I have seen evidence of poor communication. I have even seen evidence of exploitation." She paused. She looked at Liana and Mark. Her gaze was steady. "I have not seen clear and convincing evidence of incapacity. To the contrary, the evidence shows Mr. Reed is capable. He manages his home. He understands his finances. He has taken proactive steps to protect himself. The petition for conservatorship is denied. The temporary suspension of the power of attorney is made permanent. That power of attorney is hereby revoked and declared void. I am also dismissing, with prejudice, the ancillary civil claim. It appears to be a tactical filing without sufficient merit. She turned her gaze to me. "Mr. Reed, you are free to manage your life. I urge you to consider carefully who you trust with your affairs in the future." Then she looked back at Liana and Mark. "The court is deeply troubled by the evidence of planning and manipulation. While not criminal findings for this proceeding, they are noted. I am referring the matter of the potentially forged addendum to the district attorney's office for review." She struck her gavel. The sound was small and final. It was over. There was no outburst, no dramatic confession. Liana stood up. She gathered her purse. She still did not look at me. Mark's face was a rigid mask. They walked out of the courtroom with their lawyer. They did not speak. I sat for a moment. The hollow sadness filled me. It was not victory. It was survival. It was costly. Elinor placed a hand on my shoulder. "It's done," she said. "You should go home." I did. The house was quiet. The birch tree stood bare in the November light. I made a pot of coffee. The real kind. I sat at my table. I did not write in the notebook. There was nothing left to record. The story had reached its verdict. The aftermath was long. It was not a single day. It was a process of rebuilding a life that had almost been dismantled. The district attorney reviewed the forgery case. They declined to prosecute. They cited insufficient evidence for a criminal conviction. The notary was elderly. Her records were messy. It was a civil matter, they said. I was not surprised. The legal system moves in blunt instruments. It had done its main job. It had stopped them. I formally severed all financial ties. I closed the joint accounts. I removed their names from everything. I changed my will. I left my estate to a charity that supports independent living for seniors. The paperwork was a mountain. I filled it out myself, one form at a time. Liana and Mark never contacted me again. I heard through Arthur that they sold their house. They moved to another state. The addition was never built. The down payment lawsuit vanished. Their legal bills, I learned later, were significant. The silence they left behind was immense. It was not peaceful. It was the silence of an empty chair at a table. It was the silence of a story that had ended mid-sentence. I kept seeing my doctor. I kept my walks. I reconnected with Arthur. We have coffee every Sunday. We talk about the weather. We talk about books. We do not talk about Liana. Some things are too heavy to lift in conversation. A year after the hearing, a letter came. It was from the probate court. It was a copy of a final order. It was from another case. Liana and Mark had divorced. The divorce decree listed their assets and debts. I was not part of it. I was a footnote, a contingent liability that had been extinguished. I read the cold, legal language. I thought of the email, the liquidity for the addition. The addition was gone. The marriage was gone. The plan had consumed itself. I put the letter in the filing cabinet. I closed the drawer. I still live in my house. I watch the birch tree through the seasons. It buds in spring. It is full and green in summer. It turns gold in fall. It stands bare in winter. It is a quiet companion. My life is simple. It is mine. Sometimes, in the very early morning, before the coffee is ready, I think of her. I think of the little girl with skinned knees. I think of the young woman heading off to college. I do not think of the woman in the courtroom. That person is a stranger. The grief is for the daughter I had, the one who is slowly replaced. The loss is not loud. It is a constant, low hum, like the sound of a distant refrigerator. You notice it most in the silence. The legal justice was procedural. It was paperwork and rulings. It was facts outweighing fiction. It was slow. It was undramatic. It was enough. It gave me back my name. It gave me back my signature. It gave me back the right to be wrong, to be forgetful, to be stubborn, to be fully, autonomously human. The moral justice was quieter. It was in the consequences they faced. Not from me, from the unraveling of their own design. The plan they built on sand took their foundation with it. They are gone. I am here, in my quiet kitchen, with my proper coffee. The final question does not come to me as a shout. It whispers. It arrives on ordinary days. When I see a father and daughter laughing in the park. When I hear a certain song on the radio. It is a simple question. It has no answer. When did the care become a currency? And when did the love become the price? And why did I not see the exchange happening until my balance was nearly zero? That was the final reflection, the quiet echo that remained after the legal dust settled. The story was over, yet it never really ended. It became a part of the atmosphere, like the specific quality of light in my living room at 4 o'clock in the afternoon. A year passed, then another. The rhythm of my days reasserted itself, but it was a different rhythm now. The silence was chosen, not imposed. I hired a local college student, Ben, to help with the heavier yard work. We agreed on an hourly rate, paid in cash at the end of every visit. He was polite, respectful, and entirely uninterested in my personal affairs. Our conversations were about the soil pH for the azaleas or the forecast for rain. It was a clean, transactional relationship. It felt safe. Arthur and I cemented our Sunday routine. He would come over, bearing fresh pastries from a bakery he liked across town. We would sit at my kitchen table, the same one where Liana had brought her lattes, and we would talk about everything except the obvious thing. We talked about his grandchildren. We talked about the frustrating decline of a local sports team. We rebuilt a friendship on neutral ground, brick by simple brick. My financial life was pared down to the essentials. I worked with a fee-only fiduciary, a man named David who charged by the hour and asked no personal questions. Together, we consolidated my assets into simple, transparent instruments. A pension, a treasury ladder, a high-yield savings account for emergencies. There were no sleeping assets to optimize, just clarity. Every month, a statement arrived at my P.O. box. I opened it. I reviewed the numbers. They were mine. The house itself required attention. Deferred maintenance, the kind Liana had cited as evidence of my decline, needed addressing. I hired contractors one at a time, a roofer, a plumber, an electrician to update the outlets. I got 3 bids for each job. I signed the contracts myself. I wrote the checks from my new bank account. The process was slow, methodical, and deeply satisfying. With each repaired leak, each updated wire, I was not just fixing a house. I was reclaiming a territory. One afternoon, while clearing out the filing cabinet to make room for the new, simpler records, I found the black notebook. I had not opened it since the hearing. I pulled it out. The cover was cool to the touch. I sat at the desk and flipped through the pages. My own handwriting, precise and unemotional, documented the unraveling. October 12, Liana suggested setting up autopay. I agreed. October 26, Mark asked for investment statements. I provided them. The entries were a chronicle of trust, gently weaponized. I read to the end. The final entry was the record of Liana's last phone call, the cold, stripped voice on my secret line. I closed the book. I did not need to keep it anymore. Its purpose had been served. It was evidence that had already been entered and accepted. Keeping it felt like hoarding a ghost. I decided to burn it. Not out of anger. Out of ceremony. Out of a need for a definitive end. That evening, I took the notebook out to the old metal fire pit in the backyard. I had not used it in years. I crumpled some dry leaves and twigs from under the birch tree. I placed the notebook on top. I lit a match. The paper caught slowly at first, then the flames leapt up, orange and blue, consuming the pages. The ink smoked. The black cover curled and blackened further. I watched until it was all ash, a soft gray powder. The late spring air carried the scent of smoke and something faintly chemical. I stood there until the last ember died. Then I went inside and washed my hands. The ritual was complete. The history was not erased, but its physical totem was gone. Life, in its mundane way, went on. I developed a small cataract in my left eye. Dr. Evans referred me to a specialist. I went to the consultations alone. I asked my questions. I scheduled the outpatient surgery for the fall. I arranged for a medical transport service to take me home afterward. I put the information in my calendar. It was my problem, my solution. The autonomy of it was both ordinary and profound. I thought less and less about the specifics of what happened. The emails, the forged addendum, the courtroom. Those details receded like the sharp edges of a stone worn smooth by a river. What remained was the essence of the lesson. Trust is not an absolute. It is a currency that must be audited. Love should not come with terms and conditions filed in triplicate, but sometimes it does. I received a birthday card from my brother, Martin. Inside, he had written a short note. He mentioned he had finally bought out my share of the cabin at the original fair market value we'd discussed years prior. The check was enclosed. He said he and his wife were spending the summer there, fixing the old roof. He said I was welcome anytime. The offer was kind. It was also impossible. The cabin was part of a story that was over. I deposited the check. I sent him a thank you note. I did not make plans to visit. The seasons turned. Another winter came. It was a harsh one with heavy snows. Ben, the student, came to shovel the walk. One Tuesday, after a particularly deep overnight fall, he was later than usual. I was peering out the window, waiting to see his familiar green jacket when a different car pulled up. It was a sleek, dark sedan dusted with road salt. A woman got out. She was dressed in a long, expensive wool coat. It was Liana. My breath caught. It was a purely physical reaction, a jolt of adrenaline, cold and sharp. She stood by her car for a moment, looking at the house. Then she started up the freshly shoveled path. Ben had done his job well. She walked with a purpose I remembered, but her shoulders were hunched against the cold, or perhaps against the weight of the moment. She rang the doorbell. The sound was absurdly normal. I did not move. She rang again. Then she knocked, a firm, polite rap. I walked to the door. I did not open it. I stood to the side, looking through the narrow window beside the frame. "Dad," she called. Her voice was muffled by the wood. "I know you're there, your car in the drive. Please, I just want to talk 5 minutes." I thought about it. I thought about the quiet life I had built. I thought about the ash of the notebook in the fire pit, now buried under snow. I thought about the danger of reopening a wound that had finally scarred over. This was not a legal maneuver. This was something else. A personal ambush. The stakes were emotional, and therefore, in their own way, higher. I made a decision. I would not let her in, but I would not hide. I turned the deadbolt and opened the door just enough to speak through the gap. The cold air rushed in. "Hello, Liana," I said. She looked older, not in years, but in spirit. Her eyes held a tiredness that makeup could not conceal. "Can I come in?" she asked. "No," I said. My voice was calm. It was the voice I used with salespeople. "You said 5 minutes. You have them here." She flinched just slightly. She hadn't expected outright refusal. She'd expected the old dynamics, the father who could never truly say no to his daughter. "Okay," she said, regrouping. She pulled her coat tighter. I came to apologize." I waited. I said nothing. An apology in this context was a loaded word. It could mean many things. It could be a preamble to a new request. It could be a form of emotional laundering. I am sorry, she said, the words coming out in a practiced rush. For everything, for the way things happened. It got out of hand. Mark, he was so persuasive. About the investments, about security. I thought we were helping. I really did. I listened. It was the old narrative, just slightly reframed. It got out of hand. He was persuasive. We thought we were helping. There was no ownership of the blueprint, no acknowledgement of the emails, no mention of the forgery. It was an apology for a misunderstanding, not for a campaign. I lost my way, she continued, her eyes glistening with what might have been real tears. I lost sight of what was important. You're my father, I miss you. The sentiment hung in the frigid air between us. It was the hook, the emotional lure. A part of me, the part that remembered bedtime stories and skinned knees, ached to reach for it. But the larger part, the part that had sat in a courtroom and heard her plans read aloud, remained still. I appreciate you saying that, I said. My tone was flat, noncommittal. Is that all? She blinked, thrown again. I was hoping we could start over, slowly. Maybe a phone call now and then, coffee. There it was, the re-entry point, the thin end of the wedge. Once granted, it would become an expectation, then a right, then a lever. I had learned the pattern. I would not repeat it. That isn't possible, I said. The finality of the statement seemed to physically strike her. Why not? She pleaded. People make mistakes. Families forgive. Some things change the shape of a relationship, Liana, I said. I kept my eyes on hers. What you and Mark attempted wasn't a mistake. It was a strategy. You documented it yourselves. Forgiveness is one thing, reinstating trust is another. I have chosen a peaceful life. That life does not include you. She stared at me. The wounded daughter mask slipped for a second, and I saw a flash of the old, cold calculation. It was gone quickly, replaced by a look of raw hurt. But I had seen it. It confirmed my decision. So that's it, she said, her voice hardening. You're just going to die alone in there. It was an echo of her phone call before the hearing. The same cruel pivot when sympathy failed. I am not alone, I said quietly, but I am at peace. Goodbye, Liana. I closed the door. I turned the deadbolt. The solid asterisk click was the only sound in the house. I stood there, listening. I heard her footsteps on the path, crunching in the snow. I heard a car door slam. I heard the engine start and the sound of tires on packed snow growing fainter until there was only silence again. My heart was beating fast. I walked to the kitchen. I put the kettle on. I did not look out the window. I waited for the water to boil. I made a cup of tea. I sat at the table. The confrontation had lasted less than 5 minutes. It felt longer. It felt definitive. She had offered an apology without accountability. She had asked for a restart without acknowledging the shutdown. It was the final, failed play. Seeing her confirmed something important. The person I missed, the daughter of my memory, was truly gone. The woman at the door was a stranger with a familiar face. Letting a stranger into your life is a choice. I had made mine. After that day, a deeper calm settled over me. The last thread of what if had been severed. There were no more legal threats, no more unexpected visits. The story was conclusively, in all aspects, over. I turned my attention outward in small ways. I volunteered very modestly with the local library's book sorting group. It was a 2-hour commitment every other week. I handled donated books, sorting them for sales. It was quiet, physical work. It put me in a room with other people, but it required no intimacy, no exchange of personal history. It was community at a safe, undemanding distance. My friendship with Arthur deepened into something sturdy and reliable. We began working on a project together, restoring an old grandfather clock he had inherited. It was a complex, finicky mechanism. We spread the tools and parts on a sheet in his garage. We worked in companionable silence for hours, consulting manuals, trying tiny adjustments. It was a puzzle that demanded patience and observation. It was a perfect metaphor for the kind of repair we both understood. The clock had no emotional baggage. It was just broken, and we were just fixing it. The following autumn, I had the cataract surgery. The medical transport driver was a cheerful man named Leo. He helped me into the clinic and waited to bring me home. The procedure was quick, painless. The world, through my left eye, became startlingly clear again. Colors were brighter. Edges were sharper. It was a physical correction that felt like a metaphor. I was seeing my surroundings with new clarity in more ways than one. I began taking photographs, simple ones with a basic digital camera. I photographed the birch tree in every season from the same spot at my kitchen window. I photographed the gears of Arthur's clock laid out in precise rows. I photographed the spines of books at the library sale. I did nothing with the pictures. I just took them. It was an act of observation, of claiming my own perspective, of framing the world as I saw it. Years continued to pass. They pass quickly when life is quiet. I developed a minor heart arrhythmia. It was manageable with medication. Dr. Evans retired. His successor, a young doctor named Sharma, reviewed my history with a fresh eye. She saw the cognitive assessment. She saw my careful logs of my blood pressure and medication. "You're very on top of things, Mr. Reed," she remarked. It was not a question. It was a statement of fact. I nodded. It was a fact I had fought for. One spring morning, I was having coffee with Arthur. The birch tree was in full leaf, casting a dappled shadow on the lawn. We were discussing nothing of consequence. The stubborn resistance of a particular clock spring, the merits of a new mystery novel. The conversation lulled. Arthur stirred his coffee, the spoon clinking softly against the ceramic. "You ever hear from her?" he asked without looking up. He had never asked before. The question hung in the sunny kitchen. "No," I said. "Not since she came to the door that winter. You." He shook his head. "No, Sarah saw something on one of those social media sites a while back. She's remarried, lives out west somewhere, seems fine." Fine, the most mundane of words. It suggested no great punishment, no dramatic downfall, just a life continuing elsewhere. It was the quietest of consequences. There was no poetic justice in it, no satisfying symmetry. She was fine. I was here, that was all. "I'm glad," I said, and I found, to my surprise, that I mostly meant it. Her being fine meant she was not a source of further drama. She was not in need. She was just gone. The opposite of love is not hatred. It is indifference. I had not reached indifference, not quite, but I had reached a distant, peaceful shore where her life was no longer any concern of mine. That was its own form of freedom. After Arthur left, I cleaned our cups. I looked out at the birch tree. I thought about the word fine. It was a resolution without climax. It was the aftermath of a storm where the damage is repaired, the landscape altered, but the sun still rises on a new day. The story of betrayal and legal defense was complete, but the story of a life, my life, was still being written, in quieter, smaller sentences. I began to divest of things, not out of morbidity, but out of a desire for simplicity. I gave some of my books to the library sale. I donated old tools to a community workshop. I had a lawyer draft a very straightforward transfer on death deed for the house, naming the senior living charity as the beneficiary. I wanted no confusion, no contest when the time came. The paperwork was clean. It was a gift, not a transaction. I thought about legacy. I had no children to leave one to, not in any meaningful sense. My legacy was the life I had reclaimed. It was the example to anyone who might ever know the story that it is never too late to say no. That paperwork can be a weapon, but it can also be a shield. That dignity is worth the long, quiet fight. That was the story I would leave. It was not a story of great wealth or grand achievement. It was a story of quiet sovereignty. It was enough. On a cool evening last fall, I was in the backyard. The leaves on the birch were a brilliant gold. A few had already fallen, making a crisp carpet on the grass. I stood by the fire pit, the same one where I had burned the notebook. I was not burning anything now. I was just standing. The air smelled of wood smoke from a neighbor's chimney. A memory came to me unbidden. Liana was about 7. We were at the cabin. She had been trying to skip a flat stone across the water for an hour with no success. She was growing frustrated, on the verge of tears. I knelt beside her. I selected a stone from the beach. I showed her how to hold it, how to flick her wrist. "It's in the release," I had said. "You have to let it go at just the right time with just the right spin." She had tried again. The stone skipped once, twice, then sank. But she had laughed, a pure sound of delight. "I did it, Dad." She had thrown her arms around my neck. That moment was real. It was true. It was mine. I held that memory in the twilight. I did not push it away with the bitterness of what came later. I let it exist, pristine and separate, in its own time and place. It was a stone that had skipped perfectly, long ago, before the water grew still and dark. Some truths are not invalidated by later lies. That is the final, quiet justice, not the punishment of the other, but the reclamation of the self. The ability to stand in your own yard, under your own tree, and own every moment of your life, the good, the bad, the beautiful, and the betrayed. To hold it all without it breaking you. To find a calm that is not emptiness, but fullness on your own terms. The legal system gave me back my name. The long aftermath gave me back my time. The quiet reflection gave me back my story. Now, when I make my coffee in the morning, the ritual is entirely my own. The measure is precise. The water is just off the boil. I take the first sip at the table. I look at the birch tree. I see its history in its rings, invisible beneath the bark. I see its resilience in its reaching branches. It stands through every season. It endures. It does not explain itself. It simply is. The question remains, of course. It is quieter now. It doesn't haunt. It just lingers, a soft, unanswerable thing in the space between heartbeats, in the steam rising from the cup. When did the care become a currency? And when did the love become the price? I do not know. I only know the balance, finally, is my own.